We're going to be beginning here in about 2 minutes. We're waiting on a few more people to log in. It looks like there's still some coming into the webinar, and then we'll be getting started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Greenwood, South Carolina Chamber of Commerce webinar series. My name is Janet Ballsiger. I'm going to be moderating today for you. We would like to start out by thanking Duke Energy, the title sponsor for our 2020 The Spirit of Small Business Initiative. Duke Energy is helping to keep the spirit of small business alive during these challenging times by supporting their customers and communities with up-to-date information, financial resources, and community donations. During the presentation, you will be muted, so you will be unable to verbally ask any questions to the presenters. If you would like to ask a question, you may do so by using the on-screen sidebar panel on the right-hand side of your screen where the questions box is located. When you type in your question, we will answer as many as possible at the end of the seminar. Today, we are pleased to host Teresa Roy, Director of Community Outreach in the Employee Assistance Programs at Cornerstone, as well as Program Coordinator Krissi Raines from Westview Behavioral Health. Today, they will be discussing ways to find peace during this pandemic and how to stay mentally healthy and focused during the crisis. Please note that in your sidebar, you will find an area labeled Handouts. Under Handouts, they have graciously provided several downloadable tip sheets, as well as an evaluation form for you to fill out after the seminar. Please take advantage of them and save them at some point during the presentation. Teresa, Krissi, thank you so much for joining us today. You can begin whenever you're ready.
All right, well, good morning. We really appreciate everybody coming and being a part of this today. And the irony is that this is a peace and pandemic, and I think Chrissy and I are both feeling a little bit of stress because this is new technology for us. We've never done anything like this, so we're all learning something new today, I hope. So we want to start out talking about stress. And, you know, if I were to ask you, when I say the word stress, what do you think of? And I think for most of us, the first thing that we think of is bad, right? We kind of get that, oh no, sort of reaction when we think about stress because we have really kind of equated stress with negative feelings, negative emotions, and negative events. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So let's talk a little bit about what stress is. It's unavoidable. It is normal, and it's often sneaky. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we can be under stress, but we're not really aware of it. Our body is trying to clue us in, but sometimes we are such in a panic to get something done or worrying about things that we fail to pick up on some of those clues. So I hope that that's one of the things that you all will take away from today, is just being more aware of those clues as they present themselves to your body. Now, there's several different ways that stress can manifest in our lives. One is physical. So this would be actual pain or fatigue in the body. Could be some sleep problems, other health issues. Again, this one's a little bit hard sometimes to recognize, because we can attribute what we're feeling to other things, and we don't really make that correlation that stress is kind of behind this. So stress can actually cause these things. It can cause pain, it can cause fatigue, or it can exacerbate. So if we already have some things going on, it can make those things worse. Stress can also manifest in a mental way. This may look like some confusion, some problems staying on task, feeling disordered in your head, not being able to really think about what you want to do or follow through on those decisions, things like that. Emotional, this is probably one, I guess, where most of us are most aware of when stress is causing problems, because if you're like me, I get a little irritable, I get a little anxious, and so that tends to come out. I get to be a little bit shorter in my responses to folks, a little less tolerant of some things that other days I might just kind of smile and shake my head. But when I'm stressed, it makes it really difficult to sort of take a step back and relax and think, okay, what do I need to do in this situation? And then the last one I have on the PowerPoint is behavior. So we've got physical manifestations, mental manifestations, emotional manifestations, and then behavioral things. So all of those things combined can really change the way that we are managing our life. You might see an increased consumption of substances, food. It may be that we're withdrawing socially, that we are not engaging in some of the things that we have done before that have been calming to us or that have been enjoyable to us. So for some folks, number 4 is where you're really going to start noticing. That's when you're going to become most aware something's not quite right. Or you might see it in someone else and say, hey, what's going on? So a lot of times the behavior is where we really start to notice some of the problems. The trick is that we would like to be able to start identifying our stress 1, 2, 3 before we get down to the behavior, because that's where we really have an opportunity to make some changes that possibly won't end up causing us some consequences we'd rather not have. So like I said, we think of stress as bad, but the actual thing about stress is that it is, to some degree, it's a necessary part of life, because our bodies like routine, they like order. So anytime something happens in our life or in our environment that changes that sense of order or that sense of routine or what we have come to expect, that can cause our bodies to become stressed. So it would be very much true, obviously, if we lost our job. I think we would all agree that that would be very stressful. But it could also be the same situation if something positive happened, like winning a lottery or getting a promotion. Any of those changes that call on different reserves in our mental capacity or in our energy level, all of those things can create stress in our bodies. But stress can also be very good. You know, in a lot of the 12-step programs, they have a saying that they say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so this can apply really to stress as well, because when we get to that point where we recognize that we're stuck or we're just tired of the way that we feel, then that can really help motivate us at that point to look for changes and solutions. So again, let's talk a little, I'm having a hard time. Okay, so what is stress anyway? Now, a lot of times, like I said, we tend to think of it as a negative thing. So let me kind of give you an example. Stress is really, I always like to use this formula because it really kind of helps you see that it's a little bit more complicated than just something happens and I feel bad about it. So let me give you an example. Let's just say that one morning you walk into work, you're a little bit late, traffic was horrible on the bypass, And so you get into work, you're a little bit late, you're already feeling a little bit rushed or behind the eight ball. And so you walk in and there's a note on your desk from your boss that says, see me when you get in. Okay? So that's what's happened. Now, if my belief system is such that it tells me that a note from your boss is bad, what do you think that is going to be my next step? Probably my mind is going to start whirling, right? I'm going to start having all of these thoughts and all of these feelings, and they're tumbling over each other. And so if my belief is that this note is inherently bad or negative, then what follows that is a threat. It could be a threat of, oh no, I'm in trouble. It could be a threat of what now, I already feel like I am doing the absolute most that I can do. I can't take on anything else. What now is coming down the pike for me? What am I going to be expected to do at this point? What if I can't do it? You see where that kind of leads you? And so that threat, that perceived threat, whether we recognize it as feeling threatened in that moment or not, something about this situation is threatening something in our life. So it's either I'm feeling threatened that I'm going to lose a job, that I'm going to be without an income, or it could be a threat to my sense of self-worth. If I don't do well with this situation, what does that say about me? How does that reflect on my capability? How does that reflect on my expertise, my professionalism? And so when this event happens, I have certain thoughts about it that then triggers certain feelings about it, and then I have a reaction. So my reaction may be something like, well, let me tell you what. Now, if he's going to tell me that I'm a little bit late today, well, I understand I was a little bit late, but he doesn't have to drive all the way across town, and he wasn't at his computer last night at 8 o'clock trying to get some of these emails out because nobody's working when I think they're going to be working. And if he wants to say anything to me, well, there's plenty of people around here who aren't doing the things that I'm doing. You see where that kind of goes? Now I have got a reaction going. How open do you think that I'm going to be in that situation to walking into my boss's office and hearing anything that he or she may have to say to me? Because what do I really know at this point? The only thing that I know for sure is that my boss needs to see me. My belief system, and where do beliefs come from, really, when you think about it? Our belief, it could be something we were raised with. Maybe we got our beliefs by the home that we grew up in, the way things were done in that home, the way we thought about things, the way we anticipated things. So a lot of our belief systems, and it could be past experience. Maybe I've been in a situation that turned out that way, and so I'm fearful of having to go through that situation again. So the hard thing about beliefs is that we get them from a lot of different places, and they do serve a purpose because they help to guide our life and our decisions and our choices. But sometimes belief systems, we hold on to them too tightly, and they don't always work in every situation. Think back to when you were about 15. How many things do you believe exactly the same way now that you believed at age 15? There might be some, but I imagine that some of those have changed because time, experience, wisdom, maturity, all of those kinds of things play in. So I don't want to leave you with the idea that beliefs are bad, because they do help structure and they do help provide a framework and a guide for our life. But sometimes we have to be willing to sort of suspend that preconceived belief about something until we receive more information. So especially in times like this, where there's so much information kind of flying around and all of it is different in some ways, and it's coming at us fast and hard, it's very easy sometimes, especially if you have been through rough patches before and you have some experience of how that turned out for you. It's very easy to kind of lock in to that belief system and feel like everything is going to be exactly the way that it has been, or exactly the way that I fear or I'm afraid that it will be. But the interesting thing is, when I talk about stress, if you were to see me after I get this note from my boss and say, gosh, Teresa, you look kind of stressed out. What's got you so worried? What do you think I would say to you? Would I probably say to you, well, I'm just feeling that something's wrong, or I'm worried? No, probably what I would do is point this out to the event. My boss is what's wrong, left me a note, okay? So sometimes we always pinpoint stress as the event that happens. But I want you to think of stress in a different way. Stress is an event happens that we may not have any control over. Things may happen to us that we have absolutely nothing that we can do about. However, we have some thoughts about that event. Then we have some feelings about that event. And then a reaction occurs. All of that combined is actually what creates stress. The event may have been a stressor. It may have been the thing that started this chain of events, but it in and of itself is not actually the stress. So when we think about it, I want to keep in mind that even when we cannot control the events in our lives, we can control how we respond to those events. Now, you'll notice in the bottom I wrote respond, and up at the top in my equation, I've got the word reaction. What is a reaction? That is that knee-jerk, gut-wrenching, emotional-driven process where we react to something that happens. So reaction doesn't always allow for thought. It doesn't always allow for consideration of other choices. So I would like to challenge you, when we're talking about stress, to really start to look at ways that we can respond to events instead of react to them. Responding means I'm calm. I have allowed myself to sort of withhold my judgment or my preconceived ideas for a moment until I gather more facts. And then I can take those facts and start to develop a plan for what I'm going to do moving forward. So again, reaction and response times, responding can really make all the difference in the world in the amount of stress that you feel. Your response may not change the event, but it can change the way you feel about the event and the way that you handle that event. So in this training, we're going to do a couple of different things. First of all, we're going to talk about some general kinds of areas that we want to work on, ways that in a general basis, I can decrease the stress that I feel in my life. Because, stress is going to come along. Stressors are going to come along in our lives. Sometimes we may see them coming, sometimes we may not. But if I am already stressed to the max, then it's going to be very hard for me to take on anything else and do it well. So one of the ways that I can help myself is in a general practice on a daily basis, trying to take a look at ways that I can keep my stress level low so that when those situations do present themselves and life throws me a curveball, I've got a few more resources that I can pull from to address this issue. So it's kind of like driving a car. I can go for a while. I can probably go fast. I can go for long distances. But eventually, if I don't stop and refill that gas can, or that gas tank rather, that car is quitting. It's going to stop. It's not going anywhere else. And if I keep trying to push it, what's going to happen? The actual mechanics of the car are going to start to break down. And it's the same way with our bodies and our minds and our lives. If we're not on a regular basis filling up that gas tank, creating some fuel, creating some energy, then when those situations hit, we've got nothing to draw from. So let's take a look at some areas for immediate action. One is start to learn to recognize stress and your personal stress response. Now, again, like I said, sometimes stress can be a little bit sneaky. We don't really recognize all the different ways that stressors are affecting us. We don't really recognize how that's manifesting in our own bodies or in our own lives. So it's going to be real important that at some point you take some time and just kind of figure out, if you know that you're in a situation that others would consider stressful, take some time to think, how do I feel? Do I feel nervous? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel like I have butterflies in the pit of my stomach? Are my muscles tight? Do I find that I'm clenching my teeth or my hands? How does this work out in my life? How does this manifest? Have I been really snappy with my husband today? Have I been grumpy for really no reason? Things that on an ordinary day I would kind of laugh about. Today I'm finding exceedingly annoying. How is this? Am I having trouble sleeping? Am I eating more? Am I finding that I'm going to the kitchen and I'm eating a little bit more? We're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes, about some of those behaviors that we engage in. But how does stress manifest for me? It may be different than how it manifests for anybody else in your family or anybody else that you know. So don't worry about how other people deal with it. Just try to identify how it manifests in my life and what is usually my reaction. What is it usually that I tend to do? The next thing you want to do is take a look, and I've written them here as protective factors. That's the preventionist in me coming out. But those protective factors are the things that add joy and meaning to our life, that we feel supported by. So it could be people. Do you have someone in your life that's a really good listener? Do you have people that you can go to that you trust, that they've got your best interest at heart, and they're going to tell you some things, even if it's things you don't want to hear, but you know that they're only doing it because they care for you? Are there things in your life that you really enjoy that add meaning to your life? It could be something artistic, whether it's that you like to draw. It could be going outside and working in a garden. It could be listening to music. Any of those kinds of things that you feel like are helpful to you and that actually bring enjoyment to your life, those would be considered your protective factors. And you want to know what those are and have them have them pretty firmly in your head and make a plan for implementing these. Now, when my father at one point went through a phase in his life where he was having some panic attacks, and one of the things that his healthcare providers did with him was they helped him sit down and physically write a list of responses when he started feeling the panic attack come on. And his list was to be kept with him at all times, and he had it on the refrigerator, but he had one in his wallet. Now, the point of that was, when I'm in the middle, it doesn't have to be a full-fledged panic attack. When I am in the middle of a stressful event, that is not the time that I need to think about, wow, what can I do to make myself feel better? Or what's going to help me calm down enough to be able to think clearly and know what my plan of action should be. That's not the time to think about that. So you want to have these things already, whether you write them down or whether you just kind of keep them at the forefront of your mind, but you want to know what these things are so that when you find yourself in the middle of that situation, you can pick up the phone and call that person, or you can go outside and engage in that activity. So have those protective factors and make your plan ahead of time. Have that before you get in that situation. Focus on today. Now, working in the recovery field for as long as I have, there are a lot of really helpful kind of slogans, and one of them is just for today. And I think the reason that is so effective is that sometimes today is all I really can handle. And let's be honest, sometimes it's this minute is all I can really handle. But we tend to overwhelm ourselves when we start trying to get ahead of ourselves. So if I can focus on today, if I can say, all right, what is the priority for me today? Whether it's in work, whether it is in my home life, whether it's with my personal health, physical or mental, whether if you're a business owner and it's what I need to do today for my business, but focus on those things that are within your control today. That will kind of help center you and focus you and help you to quit being so overwhelmed. Because when we start to think too long term, that's when we start getting anxious. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't keep doing this forever. Well, maybe not, but you can do it for today, and that's what matters. If you focus on today and make those good, positive, healthy, life-affirming choices today, then you may find that tomorrow either takes care of itself or is a little bit easier to manage because you've already set a good foundation today. Now, watching intake of alcohol or other substances, caffeine, refined sugars, I don't know if any of you are like me, but I have realized from working at home that my kitchen is too close to any room in my house. It is just too available. And so when I start to feel stressed or overwhelmed, it's very easy to get up from the computer and go rummage through the kitchen to see what I can find. Now, part of that is, they call them comfort foods for a reason. And after 9/11, it was really interesting to me. I saw some research out that showed that people were buying more things like mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese and ice cream and those kinds of things. They were buying more of those because they're comfort foods. They're easy to fix, they're quick, and they also break down as sugars, and so they give us sort of that momentary feeling of energy and excitement. And so a lot of people were sort of defaulting to those kinds of habits during that time to self-soothe or to comfort themselves. The problem with things like that is that all of these will give you that initial energy and excitement, but it's not going to last. And then there's going to be a crash. And sometimes that crash actually takes us lower than where we were to begin with. So what's the choice at that point? We do it again. So we re-engage in that behavior, and then we kind of set up this vicious cycle of boosting up the energy and then crashing and then having to look for that boost again. So want to be careful about the types of things that we are engaging in. I know folks like coffee and they like soda, and every once in a while a donut's just a really great idea. But we want to be very careful and make sure that that's not become the norm instead of the exception, because that's going to create more stress for our body. And remember what I said is that our bodies like routine and they like stability. And when we've got hormone or emotional levels going up and down, then that creates more stress. Now that my body is stressed, my mind starts to follow it, and my mind starts to get just as chaotic. And that's really where we start to spiral and see some real problems. So when we're talking about using things like food or like substances or things like that, just be very careful and just understand that those can create more problems than they help at times. So being very careful about that. So then that means that you're going to, remember when I talked about protective factors? So when you look at it sort of that way, you may have to do some things, and there will actually be some examples a little bit later on of things that you can do to help yourself minimize risk that all of these substances are going to continue to be, or going to become a problem for you. So taking a break from technology, I love this quote. Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. And I think that's so important, because technology is wonderful because we have so much information at our fingertips that we can choose from and that will help us decide what choices we need to be making and things like that. But technology can also be difficult or challenging because it is so readily available, because then it becomes overwhelming. And that's where we sort of get into, when I was talking about focusing on today, where you sort of get into that longitudinal thinking of, oh my gosh, this is never going to end. I'm never going to be able to hug anybody again, or I'm never going to be able just to go into a store and not worry about catching something. And so we start to project our fear onto the future, and that really kind of overwhelms us. So sometimes we just need to take a break from technology. We need to do that for our mind to relax, but we also need to do that for our body. And I know most of you have probably heard experts will talk about, looking away from the screen and focusing on something else to kind of help your eyes. Our muscles tend to get tight and tense when we've been sitting at a computer all day. So we just need to get up and give our bodies and our minds a little bit of a break from the technology and from the onslaught of information that sometimes technology brings to us. So physical activity would follow that. That's very important because physical activity can actually help you metabolize those excess stress hormones. And so it gives you an opportunity to kind of work the kinks out. So it helps your muscles to stretch and to relax and to warm up and to move. And our bodies were made to move. And so it allows us to kind of work the tension and the stress out of our physical body. But physical activity can also be a mental distraction. So if I'm going for a walk in my neighborhood, then I can distract myself by the sights that I see, by the sounds that I hear, by the smells that I smell. I can focus on those things and let my mind be quiet for a little while and take a break from all of the things that have been worrying me or have been stressors in my life up until that moment. So it provides not just a physical relief of stress, but also a mental relief. I debated about including stretching in with physical activity because certain physical activities that you do, it's very important to stretch and to warm up those muscles. But stretching can be sort of an entity all to itself. So there are things, and one of the handouts lists just a few simple kinds of stretches that you can do. These are things that you can actually do sitting down. So if you're at your desk or if you're in a place where you just really can't get up and move around, physically leave your environment at that time, or for folks who have some mobility issues, the stretches that are on that sheet can be done in a chair. So these are things, again, to kind of release, to work out, to metabolize some of those excess stress hormones, to work out the kinks, to work out the tension, and allow your body to kind of unwind. Relaxation can be numerous things. Relaxation could include stretching. That could be part of what you do. Relaxation can also be things like guided imagery or meditation. So there's lots of different options out there, and I did not include a handout on those specific things, but you can certainly look those things up on the internet. There's a lot of options out there, and if you're interested, you're welcome to contact me after this webinar, and I'll be glad to find some resources for you and send your way. But relaxation, again, will kind of help you focus. It will kind of help you connect, to get centered, and allow you that opportunity then to respond to something instead of react. And that's really where we want to go with that. We want to get ourselves to the point where we can take some time to figure out a measured response, because that's probably going to serve us better in the long run than an immediate reaction. Anytime I immediately react, I almost immediately regret. And so we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So these are some things that you would be doing on a regular basis to, in general, kind of help yourself to reduce your stress levels so that are able to respond. Now, Chrissy's going to talk a little bit about some mental health things, and she's also got some general tips. And then she will get into some more specific tips. These quick tips are for when you are in the moment. You have been trying to work on keeping your stress levels as low as possible, but doggone it, something has happened, something has come up, and it kind of hits you in the gut, and you're stressed out right in this moment. What are some things you can do that in the moment will help you to relax and get a little more centered and develop a plan? So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chrissy.
Thanks so much, Teresa. I'm so excited to be with you guys today and thankful to have this opportunity. My name is Krissi Raines, as Teresa said, and I don't know about you guys, but when she was talking about caffeine intake, I was looking around at my cup of coffee and Diet Dr. Pepper I have here, but I have been drinking a lot of water. I kind of wanted just to add on to what Teresa was saying on focus on today, before I kind of get into the emotions. And, you know, focusing, something I learned in graduate school was kind of looking at the 12 steps. And I think because we had to compare and contrast those with some different things. And I think the 12 steps can be really helpful in this time. That's something that if you're interested, just, you know, if you Google it and look at those steps, I'll talk some. The first one I'm actually going to talk about is acknowledging your emotions. And, you know, that really starts with admitting how you're feeling. And I say that because that's step one in AA, and both Teresa and I work for Westview Behavioral Health, which is actually the Cornerstone in Newberry and Saluda. So we both work in prevention, in alcohol and drug. And so the 12 steps is something I really kind of look at for my daily life and also professionally. So knowing what you and your family need, acknowledgement of your emotions. And a lot of times what happens is when we're in stressful situations, we don't necessarily think on what do I need. We're reacting, kind of like Teresa was talking about. We're focused on reacting, and, you know, even especially as parents, you know, our child does something and immediately we want to react to it, rather than if we're proactive and kind of have a plan. And I know in the midst of a pandemic, any kind of stress, it's hard for us to sit down and really make that plan. But I have seen in my own side business that I've done in, I do counseling, and I've seen a lot of people kind of come into this place now. It's been about 6 weeks. I think we've been in shutdown to be able to think a bit more and be a bit more planful. So I really encourage you. I know we all have heard lots of stuff on the news, and we're, you know, on social media about how to take care of ourselves. And it can be easy, you know, to kind of brush it off or push past it, like, oh, what's stretching going to do? What's breathing deeply going to do? But a lot of these techniques, they really do help if you just try one, start with one, don't get overwhelmed with them. So admitting to yourself, you know, admitting what are your emotions you're feeling. And let me just take a second. I talk about this in our mental health first aid training that I teach. But often, you know, it as men, men don't generally feel like they can acknowledge their emotions, and maybe they may acknowledge them, but don't want to talk about them. So for the women, you know, listening today, I would really encourage you to help support men to be able to feel like they're able to share, even little boys, because a lot of times we kind of look at things gender specific and we think, you know, men or boys shouldn't share. But, you know, I say this often in our classes. We weren't given emotions, and you know, God didn't say men have emotions and women don't. I mean, women have emotions and men don't. We were all given emotions. So understanding that you're going to have some emotions and acknowledging those emotions. So you may be feeling anxious. There a lot of agitation and anger. We all have a window of tolerance, and in stressful situations, that tolerance really does, it decreases, you know. So knowing what you're able to tolerate and what sometimes can trigger you. You know, maybe it's You need to make sure and be outside, certain times of day. Maybe there's certain things that you can do when you know that this is just getting to be too much before the point where you actually either, with our window of tolerance, there's either, there could be a shutdown, or often there's kind of an outburst. So a lot of times we don't realize it until after we've done, one of those things. So realizing what's your window of tolerance, how much can you tolerate, and taking those breaks, the things that we're teaching you guys today, talking to you about, those breaks are really important, that we try to make ourselves do them, even if we don't necessarily feel like it, or we don't want to make the time. You can really, once you put these things into effect, you can see how it affects your tolerance, and your ability to tolerate the kids all screaming or yelling, or doing homeschooling, or all the things that we have going on around us right now. So a way to do that may be, a lot of people don't necessarily like to journal, but it is really helpful to journal. And this is just an activity that can be really helpful. You don't have to write feelings or emotions, but if you want to, you can always jot down some of your thoughts. But just keeping a little journal with, or even in the notes on your phone, 0 to 10 each day. So maybe how, if you know that there's a certain emotion that you're really feeling, like you tend to be more angry, or you tend to be more, you see more sadness right now. So once you've acknowledged the certain feelings that you're having that may not be pleasant to you, start kind of looking at, what times of day are those happening, or what happened on this day. So on Monday, if you see that you're anxious, and you have a 7, and then the rest of the week it's a 0, what happened on Monday? So once you look at what happened on Monday, was it an email? Was it a certain couple of emails? Was it something happening at home? Something that you could do to help yourself when you see those things happening, being more aware. And today's actually the start of Mental Health Awareness Month. It's May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So definitely I'm going to be doing some things, obviously a little bit different, but in thinking about that, it's really important that we're aware of how we're reacting. I try not to get too into a lot of deep mental health things on this webinar today, because unfortunately a lot of people, we're just kind of right now trying to just practice focusing and swimming, and not necessarily digging into some of those deep issues. But we do want to be aware of where our mental health is, because what we do today is really gonna be what, the progress we make and how we're feeling. Like Teresa said, we can't change the things that are happening around us. We can't change the stress that we're in the midst of a pandemic, that there is, that this is happening, but we can change how we react to it, and what we put into our bodies, what we do for ourselves in this time is really going to be helpful in how we handle the coming months. If a lot of times I get a lot of crisis calls, and that's, we see a lot of people in crisis when we know that they're not being proactive. So if we are focused on our communities and as people with being proactive and not reactive, then we can definitely help ourselves and help others as we continue on. So not pretending, not ignoring that those emotions aren't happening. A lot of times we just want to press it down, and that's, like Teresa said, where we can easily use drugs or substances. Sometimes, we use food, we use TV, and making sure that we're trying our best to put good things in us. Remind yourself that it's hard for everyone. One of the things that I think can bring some unity in this time is that we know everyone is going through it. We're all in the midst of a pandemic. It's obviously hitting some worse than others in different ways, but we're all in the midst of it. And so reaching out to others, maybe for yourself, but also try reaching out to 3 people a day just to check on them, because there's a lot of people who have lost their jobs, or possibly have several children, and that there's just other stressors going on And it can help us to help others, and also just kind of refocus us. A lot of times people don't know how to express it, kind of like what I was saying before as far as shutting down. It can be easy for people to shut down in this time, and we don't want to demand that they talk to us or share what they're feeling, but really trying us to limit questions, with people who may not necessarily be sharing with you, and you notice a shift in them. Allow them to have that space. Creating space can be a really powerful thing, because you think about if you're a parent, when the kids get in from school, we're asking all the questions. How'd this go? What'd you learn today? And kids they don't want to talk. They need that space. They need 30 minutes to an hour to unwind, whatever it might be for your child. It can be the same way with us as adults. There's in the midst of stress, we all are trying to figure this whole thing out. So allow space for people. Allow space for yourself with others. So moving on, look some quick strategies, counting backwards. Now this one, I often say before I became a counselor, these are some of the things that I would kind of laugh at. I mean, I'm being honest with you. I just like to keep it real. I would kind of laugh at and think, what's counting backwards going to help? But there's actual places and areas in the brain that are you're switching which side of the brain you're activating when you're counting, but counting backwards helps even more. So when you're trying to de-stress, counting backwards from 10, or maybe you want to try 20, redirecting your thoughts. And this one is really, really powerful. There's a technique I like to teach people, and so I'll just thought that I would teach it to you guys really quickly. If you find yourself in a situation where you are obsessing, you're kind of on that same wavelength, that train, I like to call it, go in a certain direction, and it's just not helpful for you. It's not creating any good feelings. Possibly one that I know a lot of people have talked to me about is, am I going to lose my job? What happens if I lose my job? How am I going to get money? We choose whether or not we get on that train. We get on that, that ride with our thought. We don't, our brain doesn't lead our thoughts. We lead our brain to think. And oftentimes people have it kind of backwards. They let their brain just kind of take over. So if you're someone, and most people in this time are, when you're stressed, we start the what ifs. So I'm going to teach you just thought stopping very quickly. You can use your hand, and basically you just put your hand right in front of you like a stop sign, and you tell yourself, stop. I'm not going to think on this. I'm not going to stress about this. This is really important to use because our brains know, even at a stop sign, we know that if the word stop wasn't there, we are still going to stop, because we've taught ourselves in our, as you're riding down the road, you've taught yourselves red usually means stop. If we see that, octagon shape, a lot of times we think stop sign. So it really does work if you try it. You just, again, you hold up your hand right in front of yourself where you see it with your eye gate, and you say stop, and then tell yourself, I'm not thinking on this. Now, you may have to do this numerous times in the beginning if you're one who's more prone to, obsessive thinking. And again, a lot of people in this time are finding that you may even have never struggled with the obsessive thoughts, but suddenly it seems like you are. It's very typical right now. It's very normal. But we have the power to change the way we think. We have the power to stop that thinking. This is actually a cognitive behavioral therapy thing that we use. So use that. Also, laughing. Laughing is so therapeutic. Get yourself off the train by switching it up. Turn on a YouTube video, even during work. Watch a quick clip. On our slides, I actually put one of a goat, and it's because you can put in goat sounds or goat. I think it's goat sounds. Maybe if you just put goat, it would come up. But it's just the ways that goats communicate. It makes me laugh every time. Also, watching a funny movie. Now, you may not be able to do that obviously during work hours, but plan, tonight we're going to have a funny movie night, and plan for that. Get excited about it. One of my favorites to watch is, and you guys, I don't know, it's really old, but still one of my favorites is What About Bob? I love it because I've worked in mental health for about 17 years, and it just kind of makes me laugh with our profession and kind of the way things are. But also, I mean, you can't go wrong with Bill Murray. Find a movie, find a YouTube clip, reach out to a person that you know can make you laugh. Sometimes we get too deep in and we just need to come back up a bit. It's not bad to go deep. It's important that we are self-aware, that we self-discover. In this time, you may be doing a lot of that. But one of the things I've learned from a psychiatrist I worked with for a while is, we don't want to navel gaze. And navel gazing is, what happens if you're looking at your belly button all the time? You're looking at you. Look down at your belly button. You're looking at yourself. So we want to take, certain amounts of time to do that, but not to stay there. So setting alarms, and this again sounds silly. If you're struggling with grief in this time, and we're all grieving certain things in certain ways, if you're struggling with anxiety, allow yourself to feel those things. But when you realize you're feeling it, set an alarm, maybe 30 minutes, whatever works for you, to stop yourself from doing that. Go outside, get outside. Even if you're not someone that necessarily enjoys being outside can help just with that vitamin D. I always say I kind of feel like I'm a solar light. When I go outside and get that vitamin D, I just feel like something just pours into me and I come alive. If you're, enjoying reading, read some things, but don't stay with the news all the time. Don't keep the news on all the time. Negative things. Try to put some good things in you. A podcast that's helpful. If you enjoy, reading books or magazines, flip through something that is just kind of light and lighthearted. Again, paying attention to your thoughts. That in this time, if you're looking at a gardening magazine, don't get overwhelmed with all the things you need to do. Because again, it can be easy for us to start hyper focusing on some of the things we should be doing because other things are closed. Allow yourself to be where you are today, kind of along with what Teresa was saying, I'm focusing on today. I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly, the rest of things, because I know we want to get to questions. Practice mindfulness. Give yourself not just sunlight, but pay attention to what your body needs. Again, that's really important. Taking baths can help relax you, but paying attention and being mindful, there's some apps listed here that can help with that mindfulness, also with your mental health. If you're someone or if you're around someone who's dealt with trauma, 1 in 3 people have struggled with trauma, so have at least one trauma. So be sure to pay closer attention to yourself or to those people in this time. Those are some apps that are great. Also, a website that I really love and I encourage people to use is called dailystrength.org. This is a website that you can create a profile, just like social media profile. I always encourage people, if you don't want people to know, slap a flower in your, as your picture. People don't have to know who you are. I mean, it's a nationwide, not just, in our community. And any kind of support group you could ever think of. I mean, eating too much chocolate, and I'm serious about that, that's on there. If you are someone, I have a good friend who's been paralyzed. He uses it because he's very young and he struggles a lot with just, not being able to do some of the things that young people do. It's for trauma. It's great for divorce. That is a great resource. I think we're ready for the next slide. So managing your time, being sure that, you're taking time to massage your fingers, wiggle your toes, get up, stretch, kind of like what Teresa said. On the phone, making sure that you inhale. Scents are always really good. If you use oils, they're great, but also, you can put cucumbers and lemon juice in your water, lime juice as well. Like I said, I'm kind of going through these quickly because I do want to be sure we get to questions, and I know you guys will get a copy of the slides. Taking a walk. I have a short little place at my house that I can walk, so a lot of times after a webinar, after a meeting or a phone call, I'll just take a little walk just to kind of get a breather, get out of my head, and regroup myself. So be sure to try to do some of those things for yourself. Again, even when we don't want to, try just to do one little thing for yourself. In your workspace, if you are at work, family photos, pictures that bring good memories. A lot of times in the evenings, I will flip through some of my videos and just kind of laugh or, enjoy and tell myself we're going to have these times again and they're going to be even better. Because we've gone through such a hard time. So be sure to do things like that for yourself. And music, let me just say, quick tips at home, and I've already talked about some. Music is so powerful, music therapy. And be cautious of what kind of music you're listening to, because if you're someone who tends to be more focused on what you have going on and maybe the stress, try to make sure you're not listening to things that are kind of adding to that, but actually, trying to reverse it up. So I love all types of music. I in the spring and summer, I really, really love bluegrass. I don't know if you're a bluegrass person, but I just find that, in the evenings, especially in the spring and summer, I love to raise my windows and just kind of listen to the music really loud and just enjoy, the music and the sounds of the instruments. But find some uplifting music that you enjoy, and turn it on and just, go for drives, roll the windows down, and allow yourself just to kind of have a freeing experience. Make sure to wear comfortable clothes. Things that we touch, it really is powerful. Again, one of the things that I've used is our senses with, you use your 5 fingers and remind yourself of the senses. So making sure that we have something around that's can help us kind of relax and ground ourselves. So using things, one thing that you enjoy touching, something you enjoy smelling, something you enjoy tasting. And if you need to calm down, sometimes you can use even a piece of cinnamon candy. Cinnamon gum can help because cinnamon is very helpful for our nervous system. And make sure that you're eating foods that are helpful. Putting things inside your body, whether they're things that you're eating, things that you're seeing, making sure we're choosing what we're putting into our body, what we're watching, what we're listening to, is really, really helpful. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and I want to be sure I have a couple of seconds for questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to Teresa.
Okay, and thank you so much, Chrissy. And you'll notice that a lot of those quick tips, they were very tied into our senses, like Chrissy said. And using our senses can be very helpful in the moment, because being in touch with feelings or sounds or sights or smells or taste can really help in that moment of stress to center us and to help us be in the moment. And I think that's very important because it allows you that break, that physical and mental break that you need to kind of regroup and regather and to center yourself. So we just left a couple of parting thoughts, and these are mostly around this idea that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control what role it plays. And how the things that happen to us, do we let them define us? Or do we take them as the gifts and the life lessons that they were intended to be, and figure out a way to help them to make us move forward? And then also just remember that, we worry a lot sometimes about not being courageous, and we think, like Chrissy was saying, if we have these feelings that are uncomfortable, that I'm just a wimp, I can't cope. But that's not true. And I love this quote: courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is that quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. Getting beaten up by ourselves or by life and getting up the next day and doing it all again, that shows real courage. And so just want to remember that, that when every day that you get up and you move forward and you try to make those good choices, that you really are being a warrior. And that's something to be proud of. So thank you so much. We really appreciate this opportunity to talk, you'll notice that we've got our contact information on here and some websites. I know Chrissy would be more than happy to talk with anyone afterwards if you want to email her, and I will be happy to do that as well. If you want some clarification or if you need more information, then we will be glad to help you any way we can. But I think that's it. So thank you.
All right. If anybody has any questions, I don't see any in the chat box. Give y'all just a minute. I also want to remind you there are handouts over on the side. If you have not downloaded them yet, you may want to get over there and save them real quick before it logs out. You can also raise your hand. There's an option to raise your hand in the chat box, and we can call on you that way. If you have anything you want to ask, and then we can just unmute you. So I'll give it just a minute or two and see if we get anything, but looks like you guys must have done a great job. Like they said, if you have questions afterwards, don't hesitate to send them an email, or if you need to get their information, email me. And we've got, yeah, looks like, hold on. We're looking. They're coming through. So far, we've got thanks for a great session for everybody. And think that's it. So it looks like you guys did great. Thank you so much for joining us on our call today. And thank you to Teresa and Krissi for taking the time to speak with us. You all will receive a follow-up email that's going to contain a survey. If you would, it takes about 2 minutes. If you'll fill it out, it helps the Chamber provide you with valuable programs and webinars so we can continue to meet your needs. A recording of this presentation is also going to be attached to that. Recordings will also be uploaded to the Chamber website in the coming days under the COVID-19 resource page, as well as on our YouTube channel. I'm also going to send a second email out in case you did not get the evaluation from Teresa and Krissi, and so be on the lookout for that. And everybody have a wonderful weekend.